Hello and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News channel. I'm going to talk about the lawsuit of SEC and Ripple, and the SEC must surrender Hinman email on Ether to Ripple. Now, what they actually ruled on this is kind of interesting because they have to surrender the email, but the judge did actually say that the reason they have to surrender this email is the personal views of agency employees are not protected by privilege unless they bear on the formulation or exercise of policy-oriented judgment. So basically, the judge is saying that the email has to be surrendered because it's Hinman's personal view, not the agency's view, and therefore it's not protected by privilege because it does not constitute the formulation or exercise of policy-oriented judgment, which means Hinman's view, according to the judge, actually has no real bearing on the SEC's stance on whether Ethereum is actually like a security or not, which I don't know if it's actually true or not, because I think like a lot of SEC personnel did actually see Hinman's view as guidance. But what they're actually ruling it as, because now they have to, if they actually said like it did have bearing on SEC policy, then they wouldn't have to release it. But since the judge says it doesn't have any bearing on SEC policy, it's his personal view, now that it actually has to be released. So the SEC did trap themselves on this one. They said Hinman does not represent us, but since Hinman doesn't represent your views, now you have to release it. It is a 23-page ruling. However, there are other documents like those written by the SEC's legal staff and other notes that do not have to be released. So the SEC also does not have to turn over notes from meetings between SEC staffers and Ripple, as well as intra-agency discussions, the judge ruled. So it's the Hinman email only that gets released, but that might actually go a long way, especially in the PR battle. So is this lawsuit getting closer to being closed? I think the earliest you can hope for this being closed is probably April. If you guys didn't know, I think they delayed the discovery date because of COVID for another month. So I think the earliest would be April, unless the SEC just throws up their hands and say we quit, which is pretty unlikely considering how far they've gone into this. And the thing is, if they actually quit, they will actually set a precedent for pretty much every other lawsuit, and they won't really have that power anymore. Some of the Ripple hopefuls have said, why don't they just like internally settle it and then seal the case so the SEC doesn't give the precedent? That's not really a thing because everyone will know everyone can guess what happened if the SEC actually does that, and no one will actually be afraid of the SEC anymore. So it might not set a legal precedent, but no one will actually be afraid of them, and their power over crypto will be greatly reduced. So right now, I think the SEC is settling in for the long fight. And that's why like all these early settlement dates of like last May, last July, last September really had no chance of happening because the SEC is basically going to fight this until the end. And I think this lawsuit is going to affect how everyone is looked at in the crypto industry. So I'm actually kind of hoping for a Ripple victory because I think that will actually set a precedent and that will actually give guidance to the rest of the crypto industry. So I think April is the earliest this could possibly resolve, and I don't really know how it's going to resolve, but there is a chance it could stretch on into the summer or even into next year. But if it does do that, like stretch on into next year, there is actually kind of like some hope at the end of the tunnel because this lawsuit, if it stretches that long, may not even be relevant at that point because we know that Congress, especially with like people like Tom Emmer, Cynthia Loomis, and others who are pro-crypto, and I think Congress is becoming more and more crypto, I think they're getting very, very close to passing some legislation that would actually have like a safe harbor for cryptos to a time where they could be securities, but they're in the safe harbor and they would actually have X amount of years to prove they're not securities. Or they could actually just change the definition of crypto digital assets and make them a new category altogether, which would actually throw the SEC for a loop and make this lawsuit completely irrelevant. And that would be actually the best solution because not only that would that grant clarity for Ripple, it would actually grant clarity for all cryptos. So if this thing stretches out for too long, the government, like Congress, might eventually just decide it rather than the SEC, because if they actually decide that digital assets aren't really securities, then there's nothing the SEC can actually do. The SEC can only force the laws, but Congress can actually change the laws. And I think they're getting closer and closer and closer to doing so. That might not be what some of the XRP army hopes for. They might want XRP to be the only crypto that has clarity, but if Congress actually makes that law, then every single crypto will actually have clarity, and everyone would kind of be on even footing. So I think if it stretches on into 2023, that's a real possibility there. So that is actually a pretty good conclusion. Ripple could go on doing whatever they want to do, and other cryptos could go on doing what they want to do as well. Some other documents the SEC will keep privilege over, which they don't have to release, are communications between the SEC crypto czar Valerie, I can't pronounce her name, and a U.S. Treasury Department office, as well as a presentation she made to former SEC Commissioner Michael Pibowar. So the email is basically the only thing being released. Nothing else is being released, but that could be a major, at least PR victory for Ripple and XRP. But I am braced in for the long battle over this. And the thing is, I do actually think there is a very real possibility that Congress, like in a year or so, actually ends this and gives clarity for all crypto, including XRP. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe. Hit that bell notifications button. Thank you and have a nice day.